Hey everybody, Nick here. I wanted to post just a follow-up video about the Sony A9 III that I've been really interested in. This is purely my own interest in how I like to shoot and gear that I'm interested in. Sony and Red and Canon have nothing to do with this video. All the gear that I'm talking about I've purchased with my own money. In the last video I posted about the Sony A9 III, I was talking about how I thought it's gotten a bad rap. It's gotten this reputation for only having middling dynamic range, but that's because people don't realize that the noise that's present is very easily correctable, and so you get more latitude out of the camera than a single imatest curve might otherwise suggest. And Cinedid did a good job of covering this, and at the end of their analysis they concluded, you know, this camera actually has latitude similar to a Red V-Raptor X. And so some of you asked me about that in the comments, and so I took some test shots to try and compare these cameras. So it was the Canon R5C that I'm coming from, the Sony A9 III that I'm going to, and my Red V-Raptor X, which is like my big main A cam. I took some test shots. These are intentionally lit horribly to make a shot that will try to break the footage out of each camera. The Canon and the Sony were both shot in XFAVC, while the Red was shot in RAW. That's how I tend to shoot these cameras. So yes, maybe it would have been a little bit more fair to shoot the Canon R5C in RAW, and technically yes, the Sony A9 III can output RAW via HDMI to a recorder and do ProRes, but I don't work with ProRes footage, and I don't tend to shoot RAW on my Canon R5C because the file sizes are so much huger and you don't end up getting footage that's a lot better quality out of it. You do get a lot more resolution, but you have to apply a whole lot more noise reduction because the footage is really noisy coming off the camera. So anyway, I shot how I like to shoot. If you don't like the test, too bad. You know, this is my show here. But I find the information to be valuable because this is how I shoot. And ultimately, even if you shoot compressed on either the Canon or the Sony, pretty much all the latitude that a camera is going to give you is baked into the footage, whether you shoot RAW or compressed. You know, on the margins, there's a little tiny bit more, but generally, these cameras do a pretty good job of baking in all the information that they can. You know, you may see slightly more artifacts, you may lose a little bit of color information in the deep, deep shadows, but generally, you know, you can shoot an Alexa 35 in ProRes and still get like 11.5 of its 12 stops of latitude, right? Anyway, let's get to the footage. We start here. This is the R5C base exposure. You know, you can see the curtains and my wife on this couch are really in deep shadow. Here's the Sony A9 III. I didn't try and color match these, you know, perfectly. It's just sort of similar. Here's the V-Raptor X. These were all shot simultaneously, so they're all using different lenses. Not everything's perfect, but it's close. Now we're pulling up a 1.5 stops. You can already start to see noise in the Canon footage, especially if you look like in the curtains. Here's the Sony A9 III, looking real good. It casts a little bit red in the shadows. Again, I was saying I wasn't trying to color match, just kind of to give an idea of how these all work. I think everything was shot at ISO 800. We started wide open, and then I stopped down as I did the shadow test. So there's the noise on the Canon. I don't know how well it'll show up on YouTube, but you can see it's pretty bad already, even just up a 1.5 stops. The Sony, to me, looks fine. Everything looks good. We go over to the Red, and you know, it's not even starting to be a problem yet. And not everything might be in perfect focus, but that's not the point of this test. All right, so now we're going a lot darker. We're gonna have to pull up something like 2.7 stops to get the exposure back. And then we'll start to see more color casts as we bring those up. I think the Canon will cast green in the shadows, whereas the other two cameras both cast a little bit red. That's stuff you can correct, but yeah, here we go. And already I consider the Canon to be unusable at this point. Obviously you wouldn't shoot a shot quite so underexposed, but there may be details in a shot that are that dark that you really want to bring up for one reason or another. Maybe you can't control the lighting, maybe there's something you didn't consider that you really want to see. And again, the Raptor here is just so much better. Yeah, there's the Canon. In my opinion, this is unusable. There's like no detail left in the shadows. The Sony A9 III, in my opinion, totally usable. Totally usable. Not quite as nice as the Red. The Red is basically perfect still. We haven't even started to approach problems with the Red. We're gonna get to 5 stops on this next one. So it's even darker. We've stopped way down. I put a tube light in there just for fun to see what that would do, to see like, you know, if there were also brighter areas in the image, what's going to happen when we bring things up. So here's the Canon. You know, there's so little detail left. Everything's just black down there basically. The A9 III, surprisingly good, but especially in the deep shadows, we're starting to lose stuff. And then the V-Raptor X, it's just a perfect exposure. 5 stops down, no problems. Okay, here's cropped in, and now you can start to see the CMOS smearing like on the Canon. So up here at the forehead, you can see like those horizontal lines, and they're here, and they're in the curtains. That's from the sensor and how it's trying to report information where there really isn't any information there. Now, if we look at that on the A9 III, it's much more even. And these clips have a tiny bit of noise reduction applied. I can't remember what the settings were, but for any group of clips, I made sure that the noise reduction was identical between the clips. So for this one, I think we used more. It's like, you know, a 15% temporal noise reduction with a 2-frame window, and I apply those same settings to each. On the early clips, we either had no noise reduction or like less, you know, maybe 2-3% temporal and 1 or 0% spatial. I don't remember what they were, but they're equal. And then of course the red again is like perfect, you know, it's beautiful. Okay, and then here's an overexposure test. Because these were all shot at like ISO 800, we're gonna advantage the Canon and the red, of course, which was shot raw. The Sony A9 III is gonna lose more in the highlights because when we use an ISO under the native, you're losing stops in the highlights. But so here's down 2.5 stops for the Canon. Not really a problem. We're maybe losing a little bit in that painting. We're losing a lot in that painting on the Sony. But yeah, I mean, it was pretty overexposed if you looked at those tests. And the red, pretty much no problem, losing a little bit in the painting. And then this was just one more random test for just like a mixed exposure thing. I'm not going up or down from here, but I wanted to see what was clipped. And the Sony is clipping a little bit more out the window than either of the other two. We have a little bit of detail with the red. But then, as a last thing, I did the extended highlights mode on the red, and of course it retains everything out the window. So I thought that was pretty fun. You know, just another reminder that, you know, a true cinema camera like the V-Raptor will have value in terms of dynamic range and latitude beyond what a small camera can still do at this time. However, I was very impressed with what the Sony A9 III did. I think all the footage pretty much was usable-ish. You know, when we got to like 5 stops of underexposure, we're starting to lose a lot of detail there. But if you were shooting like that, something is very, very wrong. Some of you have asked, well, what is it like in a no light situation? What if I want to shoot at ISO 51,000, you know, in the dark with nothing but starlight on a cloudy, moonless night? And the answer is like, I don't know, because I don't shoot like that. For everything that I've done, it's fine. I've shot some tests at ISO 6400 and they looked fine. You know, if you shoot 6400 where there is no light and you're still looking at a deeply underexposed shot, that's going to have some problems. But if 6400 brought you to an exposure that's okay, the camera will probably be okay. But yeah, for me, the no light camera thing is not a huge deal. It generally isn't for most narrative content, which is most of what I do. But anyway, I continue to feel like the camera's really good, and I'm still happy with it at the moment. If you have any questions, just hit me up in the comments, let me know. If you hated this test, sorry, it wasn't for you, it was really for me, but I think a lot of you find it interesting, and so I'm happy to publish these things and give you my thoughts. Anyway, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. See you next time.